Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Kadic Reviews. We have reviewed plenty of animes here at Code Equestria. We dedicated an entire month to it. But one of those reviews I've been holding off until right now. You see, for many people, especially in the United States, anime has been around since the 1970s as a kind of animation style. But it wasn't until 1996 and the advent of Cartoon Network's Toonami block that anime truly took off. Shows like Sailor Moon, Voltron, and Gundam Wing were part of that initial lineup. But one show from the start had always remained the subject of today's review, Dragonball Z. Let me be the first to say it. I am not a Dragon Ball fan. And for a lot of the reasons what I'm about to do in the review of this show will give you a reason why I'm not. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say during my formative years in high school, I wasn't like every other person ever and watched Dragon Ball Z religiously day after day, waiting for the next big fight. After all, it was one of the first animes that I was widely exposed to, much like a lot of other people. But naturally, just like I grew out of Pokemon and became a Digimon fan, I also grew out of love of Dragon Ball and its universe. But the biggest thing and the biggest reason why I'm doing this review is to not only finally get down to brass tacks on why I don't like this show, but to explain that not everything ages the way we want it to age. For those that are unfamiliar, let me begin. Dragon Ball Z started out in 1989 as a sequel series to the aforementioned Dragon Ball, its own separate series. See, in animes today, continuations are almost a foregone conclusion. Look at Sword Art Online, Psycho Pass, and Log Horizon for recent examples of this. But back in the day, sequel series were not as frequent as we see them. And Dragon Ball Z is actually the sequel series here. Dragon Ball is its own separate review that I may or may not tackle one day, but just to give you the short summation, it's the much longer and much more character-based show. Z picks up almost 3 years after the events of the end of the long Dragon Ball series, and consists of 4 separate but altogether chapters that we've now learned to refer to as sagas in the modern era. The Saiyan Saga, the Namek Saga, the Android Saga, or as I like to refer to it, as the Cell Game Saga, and the Majin Buu Saga. Each of these 4 sagas has a beginning, middle, and end. They're almost like separate bookends, all connecting thanks to the myriad of characters and the fact that they are referenced back to. Well, most of the time anyway. The first 2 sagas, the Saiyan and Namekian sagas, are the 2 most famous of them. Not only because the show pulls out an early shocker or two that has to connect to the original Dragon Ball series. But of course, we get the one of the most ancient of internet memes, the over 9,000 meme from the Saiyan saga. The Namekian saga, of course, we get, without a doubt, the most important moment, personally, in the transition of anime from a Japanese thing to an American thing. The Super Saiyan transformation. Of all the things in Dragon Ball Z, whether still relevant or not, this is the one moment that sticks in the annals of time. We all know where we were. We all know what we did, which is collectively freak out. And even now, 20 years later, it still has the big punch that is necessary. Mainly because the Namekian story plot is the best written of the plots. Of the four storylines, the Saiyan storyline lasts a bit too short and is a bit too convenient. Outside of the epic battle between Goku and Vegeta that could have been more properly built up with a little bit more action from Nappa or even another henchman before the big fight, the Saiyan saga is over far too quickly. It doesn't do much of a job at establishing Saiyans generally as a threat or something we should care about later. All that is done in the Namekian saga, which makes it the best written. It's also the longest one of the four, giving great character building, great build up to each of the individual fights, and characters tend to shine a lot more in the Namekian saga. But, as is common knowledge now, the Namekian saga was supposed to be the end of the series. So, it had a wrap things up approach, and it really worked well. Cell Games continues that, but once again falls back on a few bad creative decisions for continuation of the show. The Majin Buu saga, let's keep this short and sweet. Made too many fantasy decisions, didn't make much sense, and its ending was not very good or earned. It felt kind of slapdashed and rushed in retrospect over the years. It's just that with each prevailing saga, the series was written a heck of a lot worse. The writing does not hold up to the passage of time. In fact, nowadays, it feels overwritten. A lot of stuff, especially if you're watching the original subs or dubs, are massively overbuilt. Of course, that has become a meme in itself. To take 7 episodes to get to the fight and only have the fight over in 3. Which really hurts. Because if some of those filler episodes were taken out of the chord as proven with the Kai dub, it ends up being a much shorter series in retrospect. But the Kai dub butchers some of the biggest moments in the series, or because of some of their editing choices, takes out some of the most important jokes or even some of the most important talking scenes. In their effort to get to the fights, the Kai dub absolutely succeeds in that, but takes out a lot of the emotional or character context just to get to those fights. So, on both ends, you're either dealing with more length than you need or too short to really be satisfying if you're a fan of character like I am, which is Dragon Ball Z's biggest flaw. Its characters. In the original Dragon Ball series, for instance, there were over 30 to 40 characters, each given their own background stories, their own time to shine, and their own development. And continuity was consistent within that series. However, Dragon Ball Z, as it continues forward, especially in the Cell games and Majin Buu sagas, becomes widely inconsistent, especially with its character choices. And that long roster of 30 or 40 that I discussed earlier gets shrinked down a lot. Yeah, you could say it's pretty much shrink down to 10 characters, but I would even go as far to say it's shrunk down pretty much to 2, Goku and Vegeta. All the other characters are coincidental. They're just there to fill in the spots of the good guy's friends or the good guy's assistant confidants. Characters that used to be actual threats like Tien, Yamcha, Yajirobe, and yes, even Krillin are thrown to the wayside and almost treated as unimportant jokes, especially Yamcha and Tien, although Tien does have a big major moment in the Cell games that redeems his character, but by then it's far too late in the series, and Yamcha is pretty much, and Krillin, if not for the Super Saiyan transformation and his importance in it, is used as a throwaway gag. Add insult to injury, characters like Trunks and Goten come into play. Goten is made more important than even Trunks is in the Majin Buu saga. And Goten and Trunks are used as the kid act to get more kids involved. It's kind of like the guy Akira Toriyama and the writers looked at Power Rangers Turbo for inspiration and decided that we need more kids on screen to make kids feel more important about it too. And just like Justin did the Power Rangers Turbo, it almost drives the entire series into the ground in the 4th act, let alone what happens later to Goten in the future series that is now not the future series in GT, but that's another review for another day. On top of this, although the voice acting has remained consistently good and holds up with the passage of time, the animation especially does not. The animation at some points looks dated and slow and choppy, with its pen work almost embarrassing. It almost looks, in today's standards, as stop motion animation. But be aware that at the time, even in Japan, this was groundbreaking stuff. Even when we saw it for the first time here in the States in 1996, we have to be aware that this stuff we had never seen before. An anime of this caliber, this action-packed, with character deaths, which we had never seen before, was groundbreaking. There's a reason why, when talking about the history of anime in the United States, it almost starts here. And for good reason. Animes before then were given to us as largely kid fare. Stuff like your Hamtaros and your Gigantors and your Astro Boys. We weren't given stuff like DBZ and Gundam until we were given DBZ and Gundam. We didn't know that anime was largely for an older audience, and Dragon Ball almost was the ultimate gateway drug into this older anime, deeper progression world. It's just so sad that 20 years after the fact, and even with continuations with movies like Battle of Gods and Resurrection F and the aforementioned Dragon Ball Super, which is the Akira Toriyama quote-unquote true continuation to Z, it just hasn't held up nearly as much as we thought it would. That the rose-colored glasses of how innovative this show was has clouded our judgment here in the 21st century. Much like a certain video game did in its first 3 stanzas to me. Dragon Ball is not without its successes, its voice acting, its action scenes, and some of its most memorable moments will always remain as some of the most important in the genre's American history. That cannot go without saying. Although I'm more of a fan of the series quote-unquote ocean dub more than its DVD or Kai dubs or even its original dub. It was one of the first shows to be massively dubbed and complete. And even now, some of those dubs and some of those scenes still hold up. It's not a completely terrible series. God knows it can't be for a series that was born in '89 when I was 4 years old. But let's just say that Father Time hasn't really done it justice. For me personally, on an emotional level, it just was never that important. It was good TV to watch when I was 13, 14 years old. It was interesting. And some of those things that I've seen in Dragon Ball, I've even taken in the case of my own work. It's been a motivating factor. I can't say it hasn't. But when I look at the show now as a person of 32, and now that I know what better writing looks like and better structure, it just looks sad that this was the standard. And now, with the passage of time, it just isn't. But that's the beauty of the anime genre. That's the elegance of it, really. That a show like this can be viewed as subpar, but yet still important. Yeah, I'm not a Dragon Ball fan. I hate a lot of its creative decisions, and especially putting Goku far too much in the forefront, even now in present day. It just annoys me to death. But I cannot deny the historical relevance of this show. How important it is to anime fans that are now my age. Remember, this was our gateway into a world we didn't understand. Sure, it's hard to look back at our first loves and say that you haven't grown up well. But there's a reason we remember our first loves fondly with rose-colored glasses. Because nothing will ever be as special as this one is. The reason we got started in something. It's similar to how I feel about Mega Man 2. It's one of the first games that got me started in the video game medium. Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon are the same in the anime genre, and they hold special places, although Dragon Ball is not nearly revered, in my heart all the same. It's hard to criticize a first for something that means so much in your modern day and in the future of the genre you now appreciate. It's hard to criticize it because you don't want to. You don't want to damage those memories. But to be honest, Dragon Ball Z, through the passage of time and through the lens of the future, is not one of the most important and greatest animes ever made. But through the lens of our memories and through the lens of its importance, it is. It's hard to put a score on this series, but as is Kadic Review tradition, I have to. I have to be as fair as I possibly can. But sadly, being remembered always doesn't mean you'll always be historic. With all due respect, the series is a 5 out of 10. But that doesn't lessen the historical impact for anime fans such as myself and many others. It's okay to keep the rose-colored glasses on. Just remember sometimes it's good to take them off and really see how far the genre has come because of it. Sure, it's not as great as it once was. But think of all the shows that it has inspired because it was. That's Dragon Ball's lasting legacy in America. And that is something to praise. To be the first of something. And to know how many doors it opened for all of us. That is something special. Until next time, thank you for 100 subscribers. You've earned this. Really, you guys have. Find peace in your own nirvana. Thanks for watching.